Okay, Chapter 10, Section 2. Every year, our government must make up a budget, and a budget is just a plan for how spending is done. And technically, spending is not allowed unless a budget is passed. It is possible for the government to remain on a partial open basis if there is no spending budget. So, in recent years, we've seen instances of our government not passing a budget. Okay, so it starts in October, and then it goes to the end of September the following year. That is our fiscal year. So, if we're going to have a budget impasse, usually it tends to happen right about that time of year. So, what usually works, and the way this usually works, is the president will actually submit a proposed budget. Okay, Congress will take that and from there start making massive changes in the system. And the theory being the president, since he's chief executive, would be able to best understand the needs of the executive branch and how much money needs to be spent in different parts of the budget. Okay, but it's going to go through the whole process of how a bill becomes a law. So both again, revenue is money coming in, so that's taxes. So any tax increases, that the bill must start in the House of Representatives. So just like any law, it has to be passed in exactly the same form in both houses, meaning the House of Representatives and the Senate, before it goes on to the president to be signed into law. When our government spends more money than it brings in taxes, then it's called the deficit. The government makes up this deficit by borrowing money. And there's different ways the government borrows money. And again, you can also look at this as different ways for you to invest in the U.S. government. And so there are treasury bills that go from 13 to 52 weeks. There's treasury notes that go from 2 to 10 years. And there's treasury bonds, T-bonds, T-notes, and T-bills, right? Treasury bonds go from 10 to 30 years. So if you're going to lock up your money for a longer amount of time before you can get it back, you expect a higher rate of interest or a higher return. So Treasury bill, because we're only talking 13 weeks at the smallest, we're looking at short-term loans to the government, whereas a bond, a T-bond, going up to 30 years, that's a long time to lock up your money. Okay, so 1 year is a deficit, and assuming our government continues to run deficit, then what we're going to have is a running tab that gets bigger and bigger each year. Because so 1 year shortfall is a deficit. The total bill, the total outstanding that we still have to pay back is called the national debt. Okay, so it's a complicated concept because you can see these different amounts coming due at different times. So there's constantly, money flowing in to the system. There's constantly money flowing out of the system. Okay, and it's in the negative. Okay, because we're doing a national debt. We owe money constantly, but we're paying when these things come due. And if we don't, then that's called default. Default is when you don't make the interest payments on this deficit. Okay. So this is September of 2012, and this gives you an idea of, who's loaning our government money. Well, most of it is us. So all of this amount here, let's see, US, yeah, so all of this amount is US, United States, okay? The rest of this is foreign, Okay, so you can see this is U.S. individuals and institutions. So you personally can buy a T bond or a T bill. Also, investment banks, retirement funds, things like that, also invest. Okay, so if you have a 401k, mutual fund, some of that money will probably be invested in the U.S. government. Okay, Social Security takes whatever excess it has and it puts it into this, right? And then the Federal Reserve takes its excess and puts it there. That's again, that's our banking sort of system is the Federal Reserve. And then the Civil Retirement Fund, this would be like post office workers, things like that. And then Military Retirement Fund. But that's all this money, all of this money for the most part is US. Now, all other foreign nations, again, they're going to stipulate a couple of them, so China is this 8%, okay, Japan 7%, okay. You can see oil exporters, Brazil, United Kingdom, okay. China obviously is one of the bigger, okay, but when we look at up all the other foreign nations, they obviously have more than China. But so, common sense would show you just by looking at this graph that most of the money we owe is to ourselves. All right, so individuals are choosing to loan money to the government, and they've always been paid back on time and in full with interest, and it's always worked. The issue is eventually you may not have somebody willing to fund your debt in the future. And so question is where's this money spent? And you can see the biggest percentages are things that um, we don't really haggle about in the federal budget process because they're already by law stipulated that we have to spend this money. So Social Security is one of those. It's called an entitlement. You pay into Social Security and then you get that money out. National defense, again, that's military, anything military, all that kind of stuff. Interest on the debt. So when we borrow money, we have to pay back with interest. So we owe that money. Income security would be like welfare, things like that. Medicare is medical coverage for the elderly. Again, health and education. Those are chunks of money the federal.
Attention all site governance members. The site governance meeting will start at 7:30. Again, attention all site governance members. The site governance meeting will start at 7:30. Thank you.
Okay, so when you look at this 3%, some of that money goes to our school. The federal government gives us money, and we take that money and we have to spend it in certain ways. Again, veterans benefits. Veteran is a person who used to be in the military, so that would be something like the GI Bill, right? Maybe a person who's on disability, they were injured while in the service, or retirement benefits, things like that. Okay, and then you can see, transportation would be like roads and bridges and things like that. Natural resources are national parks. Again, space, technology, NASA, all that science research. Again, this would be the FBI, Justice and Administration. And then notice 1% for all these other little things, money going to pay, farmers to help them, community development, you have poor neighborhoods being redeveloped, all these kind of things our government throws money at to help. And so those are relatively small numbers when we compare that to Social Security, national defense, interest on the debt, and Medicare. Those are the big chunks of our budget.